All right, welcome everybody.
I love your coat.
I know, it's only going to stay on for a few seconds. I was forced to wear this. So my name's Dave Moore. I'm AF bound guy on the forums, and that does not mean Abercrombie and Finch. I was going to go into the Air Force. Everybody asked if it means Abercrombie and Finch, so no. I was going to go into the Air Force, but I didn't. So today, just going to do a presentation on phytoplankton. Phytoplankton. Oh, there we go. We're going to try to. All right. So this is just, you don't get in trouble. This is just for informational purposes only. So basically, don't blame me or the BRS. I'm just going to share my personal experience with phytoplankton. I'm a huge phytoplankton guy and huge live food guy for my tank. There's a direct correlation from when I actually pay attention and do all this live food and phytoplankton to how my tank looks. And I'm going to show you pictures about that as well. So I've been doing aquariums forever. My parents are right there, so they can attest to how young, since we had a freshwater tank since I was a little kid, and then it transitioned into saltwater tanks. I can still remember my first 20-gallon long with the crushed coral, with the undergraver filter, with the cheap Petco fluorescent lights with an anemone that 2 or 3 or 4 that kept dying because I had no idea what I was doing. I started that in junior high school. And then around 2007, I found the club, and then I got a little bit better. I started volunteering as a photo contest. I ran that. I was a moderator. Then I started getting involved in the board of directors, and I still moderate as much as I can with my busy schedule. So why should you listen to me? I love phytoplankton. So my current tank is just a 35-gallon cube. I have an 8-gallon remote display fuge and a 34-gallon sump. And I am a firm believer that all of my phytoplankton stuff allows me to have a breeding pair of mandarins, a breeding pair of clownfish, and a breeding pair of dottybacks. Is this gonna work? Nope. So, and I set up a WISE camera to try and track when my mandarin fish breed, which is coming. Come on. So they're right here. So they were breeding. I was trying to track it, and they were breeding almost every night. But then I kind of got sick of staying up and trying to watch the camera every night before bed. So, but I'm a firm believer that all this phytoplankton and all the live food I do helps me get to this point, because it's a 34-gallon tank. I'm not even supposed to have mandarin fish, and that's what everybody says. So I'm just going to briefly go over what phytoplankton is a little bit, and why I believe that everybody should be using it in their tanks, because I think it's awesome. So phytoplankton, for anybody who doesn't know, it's a microscopic and photosynthetic organism that is a marine plant, and it's basically the lowest portion of the food chain for everything in the marine world. So without phytoplankton, there'd be no anything. No fish, no corals, no anything. So the phytoplankton's eaten by zooplankton, such as like the copepods, rotifers, all those little small bugs, and then stuff eat those bugs, and then fish eat that and everything like that. And fish larvae. They have to eat, some fish, such as mandarin fish, can basically only eat phytoplankton because their mouths are so small. So you need it. And it also helps use photosynthetic, so it sucks up sunlight and turns nutrients into energy, and then it releases oxygen. So kind of essentially what the corals do too through photosynthesis. So phytoplankton does that as well. So there's a bunch of different types of phytoplanktons. I'm just going to go over 3 basic ones. So you have some green strains, which is like the Nanochloropsis and the Tetrasalamus, which are the 2 ones that pretty much most everybody is familiar with. Oh, I forgot I gotta take this off. Oh, that's so much better. I forgot. I wore that way longer than I wanted to. And then chlorella. Sorry, I'm horrible with pronunciation. So these are the greens. You know, this is Nanochloropsis. That's Tetraselmis, and that's chlorella. So, and then there's also types that are reds. So the Rhodomondus, Lens, and Selena, and then the Porps. I just say Porps. So just some quick microscopic stuff. And then there's the browns, like the T. isochrysis, Galbana, Thal, Che, and then Fade. I abbreviate it because I'm horrible with pronunciation. So just, again, these are kind of what they look like under microscopes. Some of them are actually kind of creepy. Like that one's creepy. That one's creepy too. Fun fact, that one can grow even longer and longer if they attach to themselves. So I bring this up because, I like to ask, what do you think if you ate hamburgers every single day of your life? I don't care if you love hamburgers. Do you think you're going to feel like bleh, and you're not going to feel very good? If you eat that every single day, you're going to feel like crap. It's not very nutritious. So I take that approach with phytoplankton. So I feed my tank different types of phytoplankton so it's get a more balanced diet. I feed, when I have copepods, which they've all died because I hurt my leg in June and I couldn't go in the basement for a month, but you feed the rotifers and the copepods different types of phytoplankton. They're going to be more nutritious for your fish and everything like that. And certain copepods can only eat certain phytoplankton too, because some are bigger than others. So, but you know, for example, the browns, they're full of like fatty acids. The reds, I'm not even going to try and pronounce the fancy word that's in them, but they're great for coloration. And then you have the greens, lots of cholesterol, and they're a little more. Most of them swim around, so they kind of can get things to eat them. Where some of like the browns and the reds don't really swim, and they rely on flow. So, main point of this is variety is nice. So what does phytoplankton actually do for your tank? As I mentioned, it feeds all the little microscopic bugs. And as most of you know that have reef tanks, little microscopic bugs, they're good for your tank. I love going on the forums or like Facebook and everybody's like, oh, what's this little bug? And it's like, those are great. And they're like, oh, should I get rid of this? No, they're great. Because it's, I mean, almost 20 years of doing this, I see it all the time. They're like, what's this? It's great. So feeding your tank phytoplankton helps feed that zooplankton, helps with coral growth, because corals do actually eat the phytoplankton, especially the non-photosynthetic corals, like sun corals, dendros and stuff like that don't rely on photosynthesis. They love zooplankton. And then one big thing that I think is an unsung hero, it does kind of act as a nutrient export. I was talking with Doug, who's doing a presentation afterwards, about my lack of water changes because I just dose phytoplankton and the tank basically just takes care of itself. When I'm doing it consistently, I scrape my tank maybe once a week because the film on the tank doesn't really happen because basically the phytoplankton outcompetes the nutrients so that you don't get as much nuisance algae. So I'm a big fan of that when I do it properly. But it can lower phosphates and nitrates because again, during that photosynthesis, when it's photosynthesizing, it sucks up all the nutrients faster than nuisance algae most of the time. And I mentioned it's great for filter feeders and NPS corals. And again, copepods and zooplankton, literally my 2 mandarin fish that I didn't feed the tank for like a month. They're still fat and healthy. I couldn't see if they were still breeding because I couldn't see through my tank, but I have pictures to show you. But when I did start cleaning the tank like a week ago, they're still fat and healthy. And it also can potentially help stabilize the pH through photosynthesis. You know, some people use the reverse light cycles on the refugiums and stuff like that. So it's kind of the same thought process because it does have a byproduct of oxygen once it goes through photosynthesis. Here's a nice little diagram that I got. Sunlight, phytoplankton, zooplankton eats the fish and the corals, and then phytoplankton gets eaten by the clams, sponges, soft corals, and everything like that. So, and another big thing is, you know, us as hobbyists, we want to essentially have a mini piece of the ocean. So, and the ocean is full of phytoplankton. So if we put phytoplankton into our tank, it mimics a natural ocean better. So that's another reason why I like doing it, because that's our goal, is to make a mini ocean. And again, without phytoplankton, there'd basically be nothing in the ocean, because it's the basis of all food and life in the ocean. So this is what my tank looks like when I am dosing phytoplankton and being consistent. This was my old tank this was a 25-gallon tank, which I also had a mandarin in. I had a spotted mandarin, or target, whatever they're called. I had one in there. I didn't have a sump, it was just a 25-gallon tank. So that's what it looks like when I am dosing phytoplankton consistently. And this is what it looks like when I don't touch it. This is when I don't dose phytoplankton. They turn into this. I do this as a caveat. Obviously, there was other stuff I didn't do, but I find when I dose phytoplankton consistently, maintenance is super easy. So how do you culture phytoplankton? Who's bought in phytoplankton like consistently? Anybody? Is it expensive if you keep buying it? It's expensive if you buy it and dose it, you know, daily. But luckily, it's quite easy to culture at home. But sanitation. 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 Yep. If you are going to start dosing phytoplankton and culturing your own, you need to learn how to sanitize. Because if you don't sanitize properly, your cultures are going to crash. Some of the strains I do they used to crash a lot, which is why I would have backups upon backups. But you got to sanitize. That's the biggest thing. I'm sure Doug he's shaking his head. So some of the things you're going to need at a minimum, you actually need a vessel. I use 64-ounce half-gallon mason jars. I used to use these bad boys. Oh, plastic, that's even better. I have 1-gallon glass jars that I used to use as well, but then I ran out of room, so I went down to half-gallon. You're going to need an air pump, because you have to agitate it so that it doesn't die. You need light, fertilizer, and then air tubing. That's pretty much the minimum you kind of need. And all that stuff isn't very expensive. I mean, Dong basically uses like a 2-liter bottle of Coke to make his phytoplankton. And I think he has, last I knew he had like a tripod thing, or like something like this with a bunch of, with the foil or something like that with just a Home Depot light. And that's how he makes his phytoplankton. So some nice things to have, full spectrum light. There are different strands that like different lighting. And you can, depending on the lighting you do, you can have, a little more nutritious. You can change the nutrition a little bit. Kind of similar to how like corals, some corals need different spectrums. I like to have rigid airline tubing, or I used to do this RO. I'm sorry, just rigid RO tubing, which is super cheap. And then I started using inline air tubing filters, about 0.2 to 0.45 micron, to kind of help me be a little more sanitary, because in theory, the air pumps, depending on, mine's in the corner where the cat litter box used to be, so Lord knows how much stuff got sucked into there. But I did notice once I started doing those, I didn't get nearly as many crashes on my more difficult strains. So a little caveat, this is how I culture phytoplankton. There's different ways, but this is how I like to do it. So it's just because it's my way doesn't mean it's the way, it's just my way. But again, sterilization. If you want to get it into this and do this consistently, you got to take sterilization really to heart. When I first started doing this years ago, I was losing cultures left and right because I wasn't sterilizing. I was just, hey, here's some phytoplankton. I'd pour it into another thing without doing anything and pour it into another thing, and then I would last maybe 3 weeks before it would crash, and then I'd go buy, and I just kept buying stuff, and then I kind of figured out I can't do it that way. So I make my RODI, and then I mix the salt water. I usually do it to about a 1.022 because generally I don't top off on my cultures, so it's usually gets a little more higher in salinity. So by the time I put it in a 0.022, it's roughly about the same. Plus what I use to dechlorinate it kind of has salt in it. Sanitize the container that I'm putting, before I do the mix, I usually use rubbing alcohol. I sanitize the pump. I sanitize the cord going into it. I sanitize the top of the barrel, the top for the barrel. I sanitize everything before I make the RODI water. And I put this in the wrong thing. This is what I use to sanitize everything, one of those little squirty bottles. I should have put this later on, but. And then you need to sterilize the saltwater mix. The way I do it, I use bleach sterilization. I just find it easier. But another common way is you boil the entire mixture. So you make the salt water and you boil it. Like Doug has a huge, how big's your pot?
I don't know, they're 5 gallons?
Yeah, 5 gallon. I tried it. I tried like 3 different pots and it didn't work for me. So I just like, I like the bleach sterilization method. I just find it a little easier. One thing, you can use Clorox bleach, but who knows what you have in that bleach. You know, like the splashless bleach has extra chemicals and stuff like that. Pool Shock, so has inert ingredients, 87.5. Sodium hypochlorite, 12.5. Bleach has sodium hypochlorite, 6%. Other ingredients, 94. I like inert versus other. And it's got higher concentration. So when I was, one of the big online places that I buy some of my phytoplankton from, he recommended this, and I use it, and I mean, it's like 10, 15 bucks for a gallon, and my gallon's going on 2 years now. I still have plenty. It's much cheaper, and my ratio, I do 30 milliliters in a 5-gallon bucket, so I only do 5 gallons at a time for now. If I ever get a big tank, I'm gonna need a lot more. So just put it in a graduated cylinder, just dump it in, and I let it run overnight. So boiled water, I attempted to use like saran wrap and put the cover on it, and it just didn't work for me. But ask Doug. Doug can tell you how to do it. I couldn't do it with my schedule and everything like that, and I just found that the Pool Shock was just a lot easier for me. But the big thing with when you do bleach and sterilization is you have to obviously take chlorine out, because chlorine kills fish. So I use, and I'm gonna butcher the crap out of this, sodium thisulfate pentahydrate. Actually, that was pretty good. STP. It's just a dechlorinating tablet in a pellet form. Super cost effective. I bought, I think it's maybe a 5-pound bag for, I don't know, 20, 30 bucks. And I put, that's just for an example, I probably put like 5 to 10 crystals in. So it's gonna last me, I've given bags away, like some of the local reefers. I'm like, hey, you want some? And they're like, here you go, because I got plenty. But I just find it super easy and super cost effective. So I pour the bleach in overnight, let it run overnight, which I have some running right now in my basement. And then tomorrow I'm just gonna throw in some 5 to 10 tablets, wait maybe an hour, and then I test it with just a Pool Shock thing. So, and these top two, these are the chlorine. It's free chlorine and total chlorine. And I just wait until it's that color. So I used to like have to play with how many tablets I'd put in and everything like that, but now I've just gotten in. Here's a tip, cut the strips in half, because then it lasts twice as long. Because I'm just looking for colors. So I get twice the money for just that. So yeah, I literally just dip it in, look for those two to be clear, and then I'm like, oh, good to go. And then I sterilize some more, and then I sterilize some more. Everything. Everything I touch, anytime I touch something, before I touch it, I sterilize. After I touch it, I sterilize. Plastic covers, the airline tubing, the cup that I use to take the salt water out and pour it into. So, and what I do is the tops and the rigid airline tubing, I soak it in RODI and chlorine at a much higher concentration. I think I usually put about 75 milliliters in just like a 2-gallon thing, just to sterilize that every week, because I have double everything. So then I just let it dry out, and then I sterilize it with rubbing alcohol. Everything. I literally probably go through 1 to 2 containers of those rubbing alcohols a week, because I just, like, my wife is going grocery shopping tomorrow and she's buying 2 more things of rubbing alcohol. So, and she makes fun of me. But
Best place to get it.
Target?
Yeah, it's the cheapest.
That's a good, we just go to Market Basket.
$3.99.
I'll have to look in that. But literally, my hands, every time I touch something, literally everything. It's kind of, and if your hands don't look like this, you're not sterilizing enough. I'm literally, it's literally between, yeah, it's, my hands look like that every single time I do phytoplankton. And if they don't, I'm like, crap, I didn't sterilize enough. And Doug's shaking his head as a, so, but I do this so that my phytoplankton stays consistent, and I have had long-term success with this, other than when I can't walk up and down the stairs. So the way I do it, so right now I have I think I only have 5 strains right now, because I've downsized a little bit. I take the jars that have been washed in the dishwasher, I pour a bunch of rubbing alcohol on these, I think they're pieces of wood. I sanitize those, I pour a bunch of rubbing alcohol on the top of those, switch them around, flip them upside down, and let them soak overnight, or dry overnight. I have a single solo cup that is just for salt water, for the sanitized salt water. I sterilize the crap out of that. I literally re-sterilize the top container, and I like literally pick up the cup the exact same spot every single time after I've sterilized my hands. So I literally just sterilize the bejesus out of everything. I literally sterilize my hand, pick up the RODI, sterilize my hands again, and I just do rinse and repeat until my hands look like they did. So the way I do it, I only do half-gallon cultures at a time. I do 2 of two, so essentially a gallon of each type. My ratio is I do about 1,250 milliliters, and then 8 ounces of phytoplankton. So that's the ratio I do to get mine going. So this is Rhodamundus salina, the red one. This is what it looks like after 7 to 10 days, and this is what it looks like when I start a new batch. So, and then I think this was either T-ISO or Galbana. That's what it looks like after 7 to 10 days, and that's about what it is when I start the fresh culture. So, and I adjust the concentration accordingly. If I know I'm gonna maybe not, it's gonna be closer to 10 plus days, I might make it a little lighter. If I need some faster, I'll make it darker and harvest it earlier. So I kind of like tweak it depending on my needs. So, and then you add fertilizer. Once you've put the salt water in and you've added the phytoplankton, you put fertilizer. So there's 2 different types of fertilizer. So there's F2, and then a 2-part. Don't forget to sterilize your hands. And don't forget to sterilize the little syringes or whatever you use if you pour it in. Sterilize those. And again, I do 2 to 3 milliliters per half gallon. Kind of depends on which strain I'm doing. And I always like to say, wherever you bought the phytoplankton from, use whatever fertilizer they use. Like I always ask, because one place uses both, and I'm going to go with the large scale phytoplankton place, and I'm going to use what they use because they do it large scale. So if they say they use F2 in one of their cultures or strains, I'm going to use it. And if they say they use 2-part, like Fritz 2-part, I'm going to use that. So I've had really good success with that. Again, I re-sterilize everything, and this is what the F2 looks like. think that's from Mercer of Montana. I'm just saying, I'm not saying go there, but that may or may not be the one I use. And then Fritz 2-part. That's the best 2-part that I've used. Yeah, so I literally sanitize, and I rinse with RODI after I've sanitized, which I probably shouldn't, because I should just let it air dry, but sometimes I'm in a time crunch with my busy work schedule. So one big thing is when you do harvest, if you want to make this at home and keep it consistent, is have backup cultures. So I have at least 2 different 16-ounce bottles of the strains I have, just in case anything crashes. One of mine doesn't need refrigeration. Galbana is not supposed to be refrigerated. And then all the other ones I throw in the fridge. The pain in the butt thing is you got to shake it daily to be proper, so that it doesn't, like die and settle. And I usually replace monthly. It's usually like 3-ish weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes 3 to 4 weeks. I replace my backups with fresh stuff, and then I just dump that stuff into the tank. And I mix everything together in a 1-gallon glass jar, and that's what I use to dose my tank with. And I have like a ratio. I do so much of one type, and kind of depends on what I'm using it for. If I'm using it to feed copepods, I do a different mix than if I'm dosing my tank. And I aim to harvest every 7 to 10 days. That's usually the sweet spot. I have harvested sooner. I have harvested later. Like when I harvest tomorrow, it's about 12 to 13 days. And I have gone, as I said, I kind of adjust the concentration. I've gone over a week, 2 weeks, and I've gone less than 7 days if I start darker or start lighter. So I personally, I thought the picture was here. So I have, if this is my table, I have the hardest ones here, and I have the easiest ones here. And I always start harvesting and redoing the cultures from the hardest to the easiest. Because in my mind, I'm going to be less sterile when I'm doing the hardest ones, more sterile on the hardest ones and less sterile by the time I get to the easy ones. And ironically, I've crashed nano the most, and that's theoretically the easiest one because that's the one I do last all the time. So I've actually crashed that one more than some of the hard ones. So, and the ones that are harder, that require the more sterilization, crash the fastest. So I do all my rotos first, rotomondis, before I do T-ISO or Galbana. And then I slowly go down the road to nano. And again, I've crashed nano more times than any other one because it's the last one and I'm usually tired. And I'm like, I just want to go back upstairs, or my wife is yelling at me. Sorry, Kim. Because it usually takes me anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes because I have, 5 to 7 strains going at once. So some other things that would be nice to have, a microscope is really good if you want to be able to see what your phytoplankton looks like and if it's healthy and everything like that. I've listened to speakers where they're like, oh, this phytoplankton looks great, it's super dark, and then they put it under a microscope and it's all dead. I have a microscope, but I haven't used it yet, so that's my fault because I'm super busy. An algae density stick, those are super cheap. It's just literally like a white thing that's about, maybe 12 to 18 inches. You can stick it down, and it's a rough way to determine how dense your culture is. I mean, they're a couple bucks online if you find them. Spare bottles. Again, I'm a big fan of having backups so that I can sterilize and do the harvesting super easy instead of having to, I used to use old ones, half-ass clean them out, and then put it right in there, and that didn't help. I was crashing stuff all the time. Spare culture vessels, like spare bottles and spare culture vessels. So I have on Amazon 16-ounce bottles, plastic bottles. They're super cheap. I use those for my backups, and I just sterilize them again with rubbing alcohol. And then the old culture vessels, I throw them in the dishwasher when my wife's not home, and it fills up the whole dishwasher. And I have to try and take them out before she comes home because she gets mad at me sometimes. Which is why my fish tank is now in the basement now. She's like, put it in the basement. I'm like, okay. And I'm a big fan of timers. I automate everything. My lights go on at the same time. I can control them. I have just, those like Wise smart plugs, super easy. Especially if, power goes out, I can tell like, oh crap, it's been out and everything like that. And another thing that's nice, battery backups for air pumps. Because I have larger air pumps that are good for, I don't know, like 400 gallon tanks. And I did not have them on battery backups once, and I lost a bunch of stuff. So I just put a quick battery backup, just because I usually don't lose power too much. I live in Ipswich, so it's usually within half an hour. So I just make sure that the air pumps last for half an hour. So this is my crazy do-it-yourself setup. That's with the 7 different strains. So Top Shelf Aquatics, I think, has one of the best charts on how much to dose, depending on if you have fish only, if you have SPS, LPS, and then if you have non-photosynthetic corals. So this, if you just Google Top Shelf Aquatics dosing, it pops up, and I usually use this. At one point, I was dosing almost 500 milliliters because I had a lot of NPS corals. I'm way lower now because, again, I hurt myself and my tank kind of tanked. I automate mine. I have one of those Jabo, or is that how you say it, Jabo? Yeah, Jabo 5-head dosers. I have 3-part, and then I have, this is my mix of phytoplankton that I have on a magnetic stir. I have changed that. Now I just have an air line going in it to keep it agitated because the magnetic stir was making too much noise. And then I have another one that I have a 1 gallon. So because I dose a lot, I take out the same amount of tank water as I dose in, just so I can keep the salinity the same. If you're not dosing a ton of phytoplankton, your salinity probably won't go up, but I literally go through at one point, almost 2 gallons of phytoplankton a week. So if you think you do that over and over and over again, your salinity is going to go up. So I just suck it out and throw it away. And luckily, I have not overflowed that yet. No, scratch it. It did do it once when I couldn't walk down the stairs. So, and again, I just have it. I dose mine 3 times a day. I think roughly 8 hours, 7 to 8 hours apart. I try to do it more during the day than at night. Oh. So yeah, that's where the tank water comes. That's phytoplankton. That's just my 3-part. I think that's all. So if you're manually dosing, I would suggest turning off your skimmer for 30-ish minutes to a little longer. I dose my phytoplankton right after my skimmer, and I should set it up so I shut off my skimmer, but I have an antiquated Reef Keeper system that I got free from Dong. So I'm in the dinosaur age, so I can't really program stuff that easily. If you have a UV sterilizer, you should probably turn that off because, I mean, if your tank's big enough, it's probably not going to matter, but the UV sterilizer should kill the phytoplankton. And then another thing, can you overdose phytoplankton? I don't know how much I've dosed like a gallon at a time in my 50, 60 gallon tank, and I haven't had issues. It just turns green for a while. But technically you can. If you dose too much, you could risk your whole tank turning into a culture. You could crash your nutrients. And then there's one other thing that I forgot. Oh, and you can get an algae bloom if you dose too much. But again, I've dosed upwards of a gallon in my system at once when I've just had extra, and and I haven't really had issues, other than the tank turns green for a few hours. But the corals all look happy, so. And in theory, if you put too much, you could kind of screw up your oxygen and the pH, because again, if the photosynthesis, and it could mess up with too much oxygen, et cetera, as reverse. And then if you dose too much, and then the phytoplankton doesn't get consumed and it dies, kind of the same if you like overfeed regular food. So again, just some of the bad things, but I've never really had that, and I've dosed a lot. What was that? And one of the harmful pathogens, if you don't sterilize enough, in theory you could put in some bad stuff. But so just quickly, some of the things that I wish I would do better is I wish I would just sterilize and just let it air dry instead of put RODI water, because RODI water can have bacteria and stuff that could ruin the sterilization process. but I'm kind of time crunched, so I do that, and I wish I didn't. Again, I should literally just rubbing alcohol and just let it dry out. And I should put my auto dosing thing in the fridge because I have actually had that crash before and had it smell not the best. So I wish I would put that. I plan to. I have 2 mini fridges, so I plan to put that in and drill a hole in the side, and then I can say, oh, I have phytoplankton in my fridge. So one other quick thing I just want to talk about because I'm almost done. So there's a couple different. There's regular phytoplankton, and then there's what's called diatom strands. So some strands, thal, che, and fade, they actually require silicate as well as fertilizer, just like a liquid silicate. It's cheap enough. I think Fritz makes some. I usually dose 1 milliliter per half gallon, but they have silicate outer shells, and they're generally not they don't swim around, but they allegedly are very good if you have dinophalangolite problems. There's plenty of places that they do a mix of all 3 of these, and if you dose it, then they outcompete the dinos. At one point I was trying to give away the stuff to test it to some people that had dinos, but I haven't had dinos since I'm dosing phytoplankton. But again, most of these strands, not many people actually culture them. The only one I do now is this one right now, because I need it for the. I'm trying to. Eventually, I want to do copepods specific to try and raise the mandarin fish, and they only eat that and galbana. So just quick again. This is my setup. I use cheap Amazon lights. I have 2 of these strips. So I have one on the back side and one on the front side. And then I also have a blue LED light in between. So you can't really see it, but it's literally white lights, the jars, blue lights, the jars, and white lights. And again, 2 half gallons of each strain, because again, redundancy and backup. I have 2 of these ginormous pumps that are good for, I think it's 300 gallon per hour. And I have it teed off with a bunch of valves to adjust the airflow. And then again, I have these little inline filters for the air. They're super cheap. I forgot where I bought them, but I do have to get in as I'm running out, so I need to buy some more. I don't know, I think I replace them every 3 to 4 months maybe. So, but they're pretty inexpensive. So just closing, again, I think phytoplankton makes our tanks more realistic, mimics the real reef, great food for zooplankton. Again, I have copepods. I used to dose all the time, and I stopped dosing because they kind of all died when I hurt myself. And I was scraping my tank yesterday, and there's still copepods everywhere in my tank, which I think is also why my 2 mandarins are fat and healthy. And it's great for the corals. And again, culturing at home, if this is something you want to do, it is much more cost effective than buying it all the time. And I think it's kind of a fun way to enjoy the reef, my tank. So I have to go down every 7 to 10 days to at least harvest my cultures, and I have to go down and shake the backups every day. So I don't know. I just find it fun and enjoyable. Maybe I'm just a huge dork. Let me phrase that. I am a huge dork, but I enjoy it. It's just fun, and I kind of look forward to it. So any questions?